Okay, I have started recording. So, hello everyone. Thanks for joining again to the following on the cloud workshop. For today, we will be discussing full about DevOps methodology, what is DevOps, and all this, uh, excitement and both were around this and how has been evolving as well. How it all started, and what is the current state. So it will be fully a theoretical, workshop or presentation on where I will be, just conducting a presentation on regard some specific topics that I believe they are the most important ones and the key takeaways of DevOps itself. So let's start with the agenda really quick. We will just start talking about the DevOps culture, the mindset itself, and the pillars that DevOps has. Then we'll just talk a little bit about the history and why DevOps was conceived or at least started, and what problems it's trying to fix and solve. Then we will talk about the DevOps evolution, how it has been evolving, and what's the actual state of DevOps, and how companies are embracing and implementing them. Then we will just talk about the future of DevOps and what has become of DevOps nowadays. What is nowadays, how we are working day to day as engineers working on these fields. Luckily, we will at the end of this lecture understand a little better, what DevOps is and what it is not, right? So this is like the very first picture that would come to our mind when we say DevOps. Someone wanted DevOps and they built a DevOps team, right? That's actually not the case, but is somewhat misunderstood. Just because at the beginning DevOps was literally like a word that mean, oh, you're doing DevOps, so we need to build a DevOps team. Again, this was at the initial, with the roles themselves. We will be discussing the names of roles like DevOps engineer, if that's even a thing, or we should like switch and start calling DevOps engineers a different name, which should be the case. That we will explore that in just a little bit. So we have like the current state or what was before. I had the opportunity to work on multiple companies on where DevOps itself was not there, and I was actually named DevOps engineer. So people just reach out to me and, hey, what are you doing and what's your role? People like trying to get a sense of what I was my role itself. And what we can see here is that we have like dev teams and operations teams. Normally in a company, this is what we will have, like the developers that will deploy develop build the application, and then you have the operations teams in charge of deploying the application, in charge of putting your application in production in the web servers. So there has always been this actual barrier here, these silos. Is what is referred in DevOps terminology, on where they do not talk, they do not like feel confident one or with each other. So DevOps itself, you can see it as the ball of construction that goes and destroys that wall, and then operations and teams, developer teams and operations team can just start work together, start to communicate, start to collaborate. So in a nutshell, you can see DevOps as that, right, as the actual cultural shift and mindset change in a company. I say company because again, when you join specific clients or projects, you will see that each of those projects work different. Clients work differently, but DevOps itself should be like a mindset itself, and where both teams are working together. And we will see that soon after, and the evolution, DevOps has not just become in order to join devs and operations, but some other folks as well: security, machine learning operations, data engineers. So following the same, guidelines and practices that it proposes. So in a definition itself, right? Because we need to define what is DevOps. Again, this is like the latest and the most used definition. If you go back into the internet or browse, some archive websites, you will see definitions really different from this, like from perhaps like 2017 or 2019, even before, of course, 2015. But nowadays, this is the main, DevOps definition, and at its core is just the combination of cultural philosophies, practices, and tools that increase an organization's ability to deliver applications and services at high velocity. So yeah, that's pretty much it, right? What DevOps is just all these practices and philosophies that allows teams to develop faster and reach out to the end users at high velocity. So you can see like some specific infogramming here on building, testing, and releasing into the customers, and then the customers providing feedback, via monitors or planning, into the company again, and then it just gets this specific life cycle of the entire development process. So this should be like the main, DevOps definition. And again, this has been taken from AWS page. It literally is about the same if you go to other cloud providers or even other pages like Bitbucket. The definition of DevOps is at the end of the day just releasing faster, right? So DevOps culture itself, it's a set of, guidelines that, accompany a project in this case, because again, I have had the opportunity to work on specific companies and I was shifted between projects and therefore teams. And every single team, if you are working like in a big enterprise, some specific teams will work literally different as the other counterparts in the same company, right? But the values, the DevOps values that they bring are pretty much the same. Of course, you will perhaps at the end of the day we will be working on different, stacks or technologies, but the culture that is within, the actual company will be the same. So, like for example, we start with change is good, right? I believe that was one of the principles of DevOps and the entire development of applications of our entire civilization as well, right? That change is good. If you have something, you can improve it. Of course, there are still some companies that do not apply this. They have been running the same, all software for years and years. They are still working, but that's not the case in here. Then we have tools as well. Tooling is really important. And, the entire workshop, we will be deep diving into some specific tools that, allows, this high velocity, to get that high velocity of deploying applications and releasing applications. So then you have the transparency as well. One of the key components of this is in terms of soft skills of being transparent with all of the team, developers being transparent with operations team, and the processes as well being fully transparent to everyone. Rewarding good behaviors. I believe this is also a key important one. Embracing, and giving the feedback that all engineers need in the actual company. Grassroots innovation as well, because DevOps allows us, with the tools and the technologies that have been evolving to start innovation. New tools are being released from now and then, and those tools allows for the company to innovate in terms of perhaps cloud automation, in terms of software development, etc. Accountability as well. DevOps, it's all about accountability and no blame, I believe, because if you build it, you own it. That's one of the main components of DevOps itself. Like if you are building something, you will own it to the entire process, and of course, you will have help from other engineers that will allow you to put your application or whatever you are developing into production. Because when working with cloud engineering, we will be developing not code itself, but infrastructure. Like we will need to own it, not just like okay, it's in production and that's it, right? Then we will also need to embrace failure. That's some of the core components as well of the DevOps mindset of failure is good. In order to learn and explore and innovate and to grow, you need to fail, because if you never fail, you will never be able to like test or work from failure or failures themselves, right? Trust as well. I believe this is, again, one of the most important ones, and not just in the DevOps culture itself, but in the entire, ecosystem of people working together, working remotely, working in offices, etc. Getting that trust of, being able to trust your engineers, your colleagues on what they are doing is really important. And then lastly, it's like these three, right? Like collaboration, communication, and honesty and openness. Now, they all three are pretty much, you can say, the same, because at the end of the day, having a great communication with your teams is really important. Working on this, hybrid environment where we're working remotely, that also allows us to have even more space to not talk to engineers or to not talk to our colleagues. And DevOps is something that is just trying to enable communication and collaboration between all teams, between all the companies. Because nowadays, if you jump into a project, you might be, facing working with Scrum Master, the PMOs, the product managers, the owners of the product it's themselves that might not be fully technical. But that's DevOps tries to add along with Agile, of course, like following sprint plannings and everything, so everyone is aware of what everyone is doing, right? Whereas before, it was the developers are working on this and the operations are just there for the release that happens like every 2 months. So in 2 months they never reach out to anyone, and just after 2 months is, hey, here's the package, please deploy it, right? That's something that it shouldn't be the case. Again, I had the opportunity to work on those environments and being the person like try to join, by doing automation and using tools in order to pretty much enable all these, these components of the culture of DevOps. So talking about more, again, just at the bottom, DevOps is all about culture and people, not about technologies, not about, AWS, Azure, or any other thing that comes to your mind like Kubernetes. DevOps is literally culture and people. As you can see here on my example that I was telling you about, you will have these different roles in a company. And again, in a project, let's try to deep dive into a project instead of a company. And you will have, like in this case, like a DevOps evangelist that in some cases will be just like an engineer that is working on specific DevOps technologies. In this case, you can mention cloud providers, infrastructure as code, etc. Then you will have your release manager, your automation architect, your software developer and tester, QA, as we would call them, UX professionals or UI UX, and security engineers, right? So they all need to know what the other one is doing. So that's, breaking up the silos of being fully integrated and, familiar with what the team is doing and what the team are, their responsibilities, So once, the communication is enabled between all these persons and all these roles, DevOps start to flow, the mindset and the culture starts to switch, right? So that, at the end of the day, is being transparent and lean and in also investing time in innovation that allows, us or the product or the company to evolve and reach out to end users faster. So, one of the main pillars, if you go and Google more like DevOps pillar, you will perhaps find more and more. But at the end of the day, these are the most important ones. Again, like communication, collaboration, automation, and monitoring. So these, pillars are the one that then, you will have technologies around it, tools around it. Of course, communication, it's something that even if you have the best tool out there, if you are not able to communicate precisely with your peers, with your engineers, with your colleagues, communication will not flow, and therefore, communication will not exist, and therefore, you will not have like a successful DevOps mindset or culture in your company. Collaboration, again, this is really important because, when working, again, working with multiple projects, we have had the opportunity of being able to join teams on where we are working with along with developers on where they are deploying, developing, troubleshooting systems or issues, and we are there to support in order to automate, enable automation and high speed velocity of their deployments. So we need to collaborate, us, the operations team, the developer, the cloud engineering with the developers team. At the same time, you will be working, with other DevOps engineers, right? In this case, cloud engineers, or any other role, but DevOps engineer again. And you will need to collaborate in order to work, together in order to fulfill, the actual task and roles, right? Automation is another pillar of it. DevOps, again, as we understand, is just deploying faster, if we can just put it in other words, but deploying faster and better, right? Not just for deploying. So automation, plays a key role in the entire, site life cycle. We will be, again, reviewing some specific tools and, automation in the upcoming sessions. So automation needs to happen in everywhere, not just on the provisional infrastructure or creation of infrastructure, but deploying, infrastructure, building the infrastructure, and at the same time the same goes to the development. Like applications need to be automated, and soon after we'll realize that these key components or these pillars have evolved, into now getting into some other departments that perhaps they were not conceived, but the same logic applies, right? Applying these four pillars to finance, perhaps, will allow the finance teams literally to speed things up. Whereas the goal will not be like deploy faster to end users, but deploy and have the reports faster, right? Cost reporting faster. The same will go to data engineering, machine learning engineering, and so forth. So if you see these four pillars in here, is because they can be applied literally to every single part of a company. Again, this is something that has been evolving for the last couple of years. Nowadays, we're seeing most and most adoption of security, teams adopting DevOps, DevOps, the pillar, the mindset, and, the cultural shift of being on a security team and now being able to apply DevOps principles into security, right? Security in all ways. And lastly, the monitoring, that's another part, because DevOps also focuses on monitoring and alerting. Not just, when we say monitoring, alerting, we literally just think about applications or, okay, my application is up and running or my application is down. But normally monitoring will also refer to like following OKRs, following, these specific metrics, like for example, how much deployments are we doing per month, right? How much bugs are we fixing on production per month? How many hotfixes are we doing every single release that we are doing, and so forth? So this type of monitoring will also allow all entire teams to be aware of the data and work from that data. So now let's jump into DevOps history. This is again will be on where it all started and how it was conceived. It's just a brief history again. Back in 2017, right? This engineer Patrick DeBois, issues between devs and operations team. It encountered issues, and it started working about it. Back then there were not that internet was already there, but there wasn't like a lot of places so we could talk. Twitter, I believe, already existed, but wasn't like a really great tool like Reddit or other tools there, by to reach out to other colleagues in other companies to see, hey, we're having these issues between devs and ops, and we're trying to solve them, right? Soon after, 2 years later, this conference, and by the way, this conference is already here on the references on these slides. Patrick stumbles upon the talk that 10 deploys per day and collaboration of Flickr. So, this was one of the main ones that actually gave birth, I will say, into this interest of engineering teams to be able to deploy, faster. So Flickr out of nowhere said on 2019, we are doing 10 deploys or most per day. So like everyone lose their mind, because normally practice was that deployment was done in the best scenario, and that was like a normal data to do a deployment every week, at the end of the week or Fridays and everything. And that's why we also have this joke now to not deploy on Fridays. But before, everything was possible within DevOps, in terms of automation, the tools themselves, deployments were literally done on Fridays or even Saturdays, just to not break things up. Once again, the DevOps days started on 2009. This DevOps day started, as a forum, for start, engineers going and start talking about their issues and how other people have started working on solving them. This, I believe, were the first conference back then when, every single person in the room was having issues deploying, having issues, being able to talk to the other team, to the developers, and put the operational side, on the deployments in production. So soon after, those, of course, conferences started to evolve, and nowadays we have DevOps days all around the world, where people just join and start talking, about what they are, the paying goals, what they are doing, so people can learn in there. And that's one of the pillars of collaboration, and not just from your entire, not just on your company, but now you can see collaboration between all people working on different companies and projects all around the world. Soon after, we have the agile techniques of Scrum, of Scrum that get also involved into the DevOps and following DevOps and entering these Scrum practices of Agile. Then 2015, just we start seeing more cloud adoption. Cloud services provider like Amazon and Azure started providing like these DevOps tools themselves, like providing CI/CD pipelines and everything. And literally today, we are still adopting DevOps. Again, I have seen some specific companies that they're having, engineers are have been working on mainframes and are on premise, and they haven't worked like with DevOps mindset or methodology. Just before joining Admios, I had the opportunity to work like in a local bank where they literally have this issue of having developers in operations teams, and they literally fall. We're fighting just to see who was owner of the development teams, right? So this is still the case. You don't think that it hasn't go away. There are some companies that haven't still implemented DevOps mindset or cultural shift. Once again, we have this other one, 2017. Again, this is where we start seeing the word DevOps over the internet. Then this is something that I wanted to mention on the 2010, the continuous delivery book was published. This was like the first book ever on like perhaps something related to DevOps and what you can do with DevOps. Then 2013, the Phoenix Project book was published. And literally, this is one of the books that, well, Omar will be talking about in just a second. This is one of the books that provided more feedback and provided a real holistic view of what DevOps can bring to your company, and was, I believe, it is one of the most read book on regards, DevOps and cloud operations. That is also focused to target like top tier company, officers, like, for example, CEOs, CFOs, so they can, if they read like the specific of this book, they will understand why DevOps is so important in the entire company. At the same time, 2016 is the DevOps handbook release. That's literally like the set of principles and guidelines where to apply DevOps, like more in a more technical overview, like how to apply CI/CD, when to run it, monitoring, logging, etc. And well, 2019 was the 10-year anniversary of DevOps Days. Once it was conceived, and 10 years literally evolved, literally extreme. 2006 was also on where Amazon released S3, and from that point on, we can see also the evolution of cloud providers that we will be reaching out. We will be talking about more in the next lessons. So yeah, Omar, maybe you can give us a brief overview of these two books that you have read.
Hey guys, yeah, thanks, Andres. So actually, I was really scheduled to like talk on this session, but because I were going to include these two books, I was kind of very keen to talk about them. So the DevOps Handbook, right? It's a really good comprehensive guideline that outlines, the key principles, best practices, case studies, for DevOps. It really truly emphasizes, the importance of like collaboration and between development and operations teams. And it goes from like automation, manual processes through CI/CD, like Andres mentioned, and having feedback loops to drive improvement. And I believe it's a really good tool to like create actionable steps in implementing, DevOps culture within your teams, your communities, your like companies and whatnot. And it is a really good foundational resource, right? If you want to go into like the DevOps world, or if you're really a DevOps practitioner and you want to like brush up on some concepts. And on the other hand, the Phoenix Project, takes all of that great knowledge and insight, but takes the perspective of a novel. So it is a fictional novel that follows an IT manager through like his journey, trying to right all the wrongs from his IT department, because it's like burned to the ground, crisp, because of all the bad practices. So you get to see the character kind of like internalizing a lot of these DevOps principles and implementing them, really benefiting from all of those principles. You get to see them grow, fostering collaboration, and it is a really good book in that sense. So there's actually another book that is not here. It's called The Unicorn Project. It also tackles a bit of like DevOps challenges. but that one is more geared towards digital disruption and kind of harnessing the power of data. So that is also a good read if you're a developer. And like Andres mentioned, at least for these two novels, are not so technical or very technical in the minimum, so anyone can read them and kind of like internalize all of these practices in a way that it parallels a lot of real world challenges, so that these books actually do a great work showing you um, how these specific skills and principles tackle very real world problems. So definitely great reads for everyone. These were all written by Jin Kim and Associates. And like Andres mentioned, the finished project was first released on 2013, followed by the DevOps Handbook. And the newer one, which I don't remember when it was released, is the Unicorn Project. So yeah. And yeah, we can go back to Andres on DevOps evolution. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Mar. Literally, yeah, the next sequel is the Unicorn Project, and that talks about some tools that we will also be deep diving on the next lectures, and more related again to disruptive technologies and cloud operations as well. So thanks, Amar, again. So the DevOps evolution itself, we start with manual execution. Again, this was the case when you do not have anything in place like automation, like you don't have like CI/CD, you don't have monitoring, nothing. Uh, then you will have your evolution into scripting. Again, this is the DevOps evolution in a process of being able to release faster in order to release your products into the end users. Then you have a scripting soon after. Once you start with scripting, of course, we just saw bash scripting. This is literally what we're talking about. Then we will have orchestration, and then you will have like autonomics and full after. This is like the full and the unicorn, as we will like to refer, yeah, as a cognitive execution of steps. And if you can see in here, you can see like the attributes of any and all of them. Like for example, the manual, like everything like one-off, non-repeatable. But then the scripting, you will start doing like linear and standard and repeatable functions, which is like the current state you can see in here, like in specific companies, because it's the most normal, I would say, state of DevOps. If you jump into different companies, like with talking in terms of experience, when you jump into different projects, clients, you will literally see these ones. Literally, perhaps some of them are already onto autonomics. But again, like for example, talking about activities on orchestration, you will have like complex, standard, and multi-scripted. And orchestration is in terms of microservices, in this case, by using specific tools for doing container orchestration. And then you have like in autonomics, like processes like are dynamic, again, like non-standard, contextual and interference themselves. And lastly, and the cognitive, which is something related with machine learning, is somewhere your operations are predictive. Given the fact that you have some specific data, you will have self learning and self healing applications, self healing processes that you are deploying. And again, this is like the future state that there might be some companies out there that they are already doing them, but given the fact that this really high technical, those specific practices are still not out there. There are already some tools that you can allow or start playing around, but like for production grade might not be. So again, like implementing this will be manual labor, the manual execution. Then you start with script, then you start scripting of scripts again with Kubernetes or any other orchestrator, then with machine observation, and then you would end with machine learning that will allow you to start working with these tools in order to get into a cognitive level. So in order to as well speed things up, because we're running out of time, we also have this meme from a cloud guru on where we see the evolution of operations, right? It all started with ops. You can see like how it has been evolving into this specific organism. Then you have DevOps, a cross-functional marvel, they say, because we are now cross-functional between teams, vastly increased agility of DevOps. Then you start evolving into DevSecOps. Again, this will be like something that we'll just discuss in the next slide. And then you start doing, the meme, right? That's something that doesn't exist, but it's how it will be continue to evolve, like DevSec, ML.
Your audio got cut off.
Yeah, I think you can. Thank you.
Yeah,
Uh,
I can hear you again.
So yeah, we were talking about this one. Like for example, this is what we have now. Like security and DevOps, they have evolved into DevSecOps, and this is just a really good meme. So lastly, we will now have these roles, right? So as I started today saying, DevOps engineer shouldn't be like a role that someone has, like for example myself. But again, this is something that will literally depend on the company that you are working on. If your company or the company is not fully like, I will not say evolved, but like in terms of DevOps definitions and mindset, it will just say DevOps engineer, and you are in charge of literally doing everything related to DevOps, right? That will be technology, CI/CD, deployment, etc. But soon after, we saw that evolution on DevOps Day. The conference, people exposing their own ideas. What we have now is that we DevOps role, DevOps engineer should has evolved into specifics. Like for example, the SRE engineer, this will be the engineer that is fully in charge of adding security and reliability engineering to the product. These engineers will pretty much be in charge of uh, working with the platform or the services that a company has, perhaps a product, in order to have it fully available and fully having the uptimes in there. But they will work at the same with the same with the same technologies. Literally pretty much all of these roles will use the same technologies, or at least some sort of same technologies. Like for example, they will use a cloud provider, they will use an infrastructure as code tool, they will use monitoring and containers. Then again, you will have platform engineering, the same type of SRE, but in this type, these engineers will fully focus on the application that is being deployed, like perhaps a service. Like if you're working for perhaps Pinterest, you will be a platform engineer that will be in charge of having the platform up and running in there. Then you will have the most common one. DevOps engineer itself has evolved to be called like a cloud engineer, because that's literally more. The term itself is more decent than just saying DevOps. So cloud engineer will be in charge as well of working with the cloud, with the cloud provider, and therefore with all the products and the services that developers or the application uses, right? MLOps engineer is a new one as well. I would say new one because machine learning AI has been evolving for this last couple of years now. So MLOps engineers are the one in charge of pretty much enabling machine learning operations, applying the DevOps, all these principles that we saw, collaboration, communication into machine learning, literally deployment process, and everything that happens within MLOps or machine learning is different than an application release. This is something really interesting as well. And yeah, it's also evolving. DevSecOps is now the engineers that are, security engineers and are applying security within DevOps practices, applying, technologies into hardening system and applications. FinOps will be the ones that are, working with the finance teams. Nowadays, since we have a lot of running in the cloud and using different services, operations for finance are also important. Last two, data operations will be, the data engineers that are now applying DevOps, to the data pipelines, to the ETL processes of getting information and working with data. So literally, I have the opportunity to work with them, and it's really an interesting case on how you can apply, the same technologies and pillars like CI/CD into data. Lastly, this is a new one, again, well, not new one per se, but like a Kubernetes engineer. So you will see like job posting of Kubernetes engineer instead of DevOps or SRE or cloud, because these are engineers that are fully focused on Kubernetes, or container orchestrator, that we will be also working on the next lessons. And literally they are just focused on managing Kubernetes clusters and working with the guidelines of DevOps in order to enable faster deployments of the applications. So these are the references, and without further ado, we jump into the Q&A section.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure thing.
Yeah. just want, what's your opinion on platform engineering uh, as some sort of evolution of DevOps itself? Since I feel like this is up to a certain point, DevOps is very it takes a lot of stuff, and it requires a lot of stuff from the individual developers. So at some point, you will require somebody that gives the rest of the team the tools to be able to deploy. That's it. Somebody at the end of the day, if you are using Kubernetes, somebody has to set up the Kubernetes cluster. So, saying that? What's your opinion on platform engineering and being able to, and having people proactively solve platform problems before the development is done?
Right, great question. Yeah, in terms of platform engineering, that will be engineers that are in charge, like for example, a service or application. You just mentioned Kubernetes, right? Let's say suppose you have your application or your project that deploys like perhaps like let me see, like a calendar, for example. So you will have like your calendar service, your entire application that is built on top of Kubernetes. That will be like the platform itself. So platform engineering will be in charge of managing the entire application, and also, well, not the application but the infrastructure and all the core services that enable you to have their calendar service up and running, and working with the developers teams. This is like the tricky part, because that will depend on the company policies on where you can give permissions to developers or not, let the platform owners to like own the actual services, right? This is something again really interesting, because in terms of DevOps there shouldn't be like bottlenecks, but most of the times in terms of policies, compliance, there are some constraints that cannot be like fully removed, and therefore you will have a little bit of bottlenecks from your developers and your platform engineering. So yeah, that should be like the case. Let me know if that solved the question.
It's more like, what's your opinion of being able to, of instead of having everybody do everything, the entire stack, just having somebody that, a platform engineer in this case, somebody that proactively looks for ways to solve the situation. As I understand, that's platform engineering. A platform engineer that knows, hey, I'm going to have to sell this platform I'm building to the rest of the developers, so that instead of the developers have each one having to do their own solution for their own different problems, I can give the solution to them before they ask for it.
Yeah, okay, yeah, I understand. Yeah, no, literally, platform engineer will allow, by tools or the means, in order to have, the other teams or, other developers to being able to not require or depend on platform engineering, like having fully automated CI/CD pipelines and so forth. But of course, as you just mentioned, there might be some specific scenarios on where the developer or someone wants to be proactive, but perhaps doesn't have the permissions that is normally the case to improve the solution. But that's somewhere the DevOps principles come in place, right? To have a collaboration and conversation and start raising their hands and saying, hey, we can improve this, right? But uh, perhaps in terms of technology or knowledge or permissions is not possible by me, and then we should work together and try to accomplish this, right?
Okay, thank you.
Thanks to you.
Hey, Andre,
I'm sorry, I thought I heard someone.
Sorry, that was me. Given that you've seen so many different companies and in different states of readiness, what are the common assets you look for when you kind of jump into understanding a new customer's ecosystem? You know, that in a lot of cases, you know, on the development side, I'm familiar with like reading code, but what is the, you know, what are the common ways that when you jump into someone's new environment, how you get situated?
That's a great question, Kelly. Thank you. Yeah, normally that will fully depend. You know, the first thing that you will see, you know, in terms of, as you just mentioned, as a developer, you will try to go to the base, to the code base, and see, okay, this is what we have. Normally, what we will see on different clients and project is that if they have infrastructure as code, that will be like really, really easy to at least understand what they have. So that will be like the first one, because as a cloud engineers, as everything related to cloud or DevOps, you know, we work with infrastructure systems and everything. So if a company or a project has like infrastructure as code, that will be really, really a good start, because in there you can just start reading and searching and seeing what they have without documentation whatsoever. Again, because infrastructure as code, that is one of the things it provides. But you can also jump into another scenario where there is no infrastructure as code, right? So that's actually a little bit tricky. So in that specific case, you will literally depend on, you know, on your other teammates, you know, in order to give you knowledge transfer and, you know, point you into the right direction. And then, you know, hey, we have these systems, but they have these specific, you know, tricks or details that they are not fully documented, but we are working on it and everything. So, you know, you can jump into those two scenarios, right? It's, again, in these two scenarios, most of the times documentation is not enough. Again, in some scenarios, there's literally zero documentation. So it's just a matter of asking, you know, the people that has been on the project for the last 10 years and, you know, getting all the information that you need. Again, that's a drastic case, but it has happened before and a lot of times. Normally what we see, you know, because, you know, DevOps is being adopted in many companies, is that we start to see like at least some sort of infrastructure as code, and then again some sort of documentation of the current systems and what they have. And soon after, you know, as soon as you start working with the engineering department and the engineers, you will start to understand, you know, the set of practices that they are doing in order to apply to these technologies, right? Because just to finalize at the end, they are the same technologies, but perhaps they are all using AWS, they are all using GCP, but they are using it differently, right? So as soon as you understand those tools, you will be able to like squeeze in, you know, into the actual procedures and whatnot of the company.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Thanks, Kelly. Okay, if there are no more questions, I think we can finish here. So thank you very much for joining, for listening to me this couple of minutes. So let's see you next week. We will be now talking about CI/CD, software development lifecycle, and, you know, automation of this software development lifecycle. We will be performing like an example of deploying applications, a static website. So it should be really interesting. Looking forward to it. Again, thanks for joining and have a great day.
Adios.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, guys. Bye.
Bye.